haunting, if I say so myself. Now, one thing that's notable is this guy's hairline. It's been exactly the same since What's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we are going to be talking about the castrati. So this is a topic I've mentioned a handful of times at this point in passing in some of my old videos, and basically how these children were essentially castrated prior to hitting puberty to preserve their angelic singing voices, you know, historically. And this isn't really something that goes on now, but back in the day, to support families, you know, if they had a child that was, you know, a valuable asset to the family in terms of their ability to sing, having them have a flood of DHT into the system and testosterone would consequently ruin their voice, thus limiting their money-making potential. At least that was my understanding, and I wanted to circle back and do a dedicated video to it because it has a lot of interesting overlap with some of the concepts I've talked about previously about like nuclear protocols for hair loss prevention, as well as even growing as a teenager. Something very interesting is not only that the castrati did not experience male pattern baldness, but they also grew to disproportionate height relative to their, you know, counterparts who went through puberty normally. So basically I want to go through a couple articles I found that are basically elaborate in better words than I can, because it knows it far more elaborately than I do, about their history, kind of why it happened, you know, what the deal is, and some images of depictions of them. And even when you see the anatomy, like the skeleton of these guys, like you see the strange kind of like morphological changes that occurred with the result of testosterone, DHT, and estrogen deprivation. So essentially the castrati would operate simply via adrenal hormones for their entire lives, and like from before puberty too. So their development through puberty was kind of interesting to say the least. So this is the first article I wanted to go into. It's what was a castrato and what did they sound like? So for a solid portion of musical history, castratos had a prominent role in operas, churches, and courts across Europe. But why were young boys forced to undergo the gruesome operation? How did it affect their voices? A castrato is a male singer who was castrated before puberty. The immediate effect on their voice was that they retained the high notes and range of their immature voice, but the operation also had a variety of other effects. The lack of testosterone meant that the singer's bones didn't harden, so their bones usually grew unusually long. So you'll know about growth plate fusion. You'll know, at least in general, like the mechanism behind the blunting or the stunting. It's not stunting of your growth, but just how your body like physiologically shuts off and tells you to stop growing in height, and you know your bone development in terms of length, etc. during your upbringing as you're flooded with hormones. It's the result of testosterone aromatizing into estrogen in boys. So the lack of testosterone, and when they're saying the lack of testosterone, they more so mean lack of estrogen, like in terms of actually stopping the physiologic process where it should have been. It's an estrogen mediated cascade. So the testosterone is the precursor to the estrogen that ultimately is the kind of like off switch in this equation. So their bones usually grew unusually long. So castratos were A, very tall, and B, had very large rib cages, giving them a vast amount of breath capacity. Castratos, or castrati, or castrati, however, as it should technically be, could wow audiences by holding notes for a superhuman amount of time, as well as singing higher than a naturally matured male voice could. So this is a portrait of Italian castrato singer Farinelli anyway. So what is the history of the castrati? In 400 AD, in Constantinople, the Empress feel like a movie narrator right now. In Constantinople, the Empress Aelia Eudoxia had a eunuch choir master, Bryson. That's a fucking sick hoss name for a eunuch choir master. They have no balls, but my name's fucking Bryson. Side note, eunuchs were castrated after puberty, so the operation didn't necessarily have an impact on their voice. Okay, so we're talking about eunuchs right now, not castrati. But castrato singers first appeared in Europe in the mid-16th century. In 1589, a papal bull was even passed ordering that the young boys and falsetto singers of the choir of St. Peter's in Rome be replaced by castratos. Castrato singers appeared in Paris, Munich, as they also made up the high voice parts of the Sistine Chapel choir. The operation was never legal, however, so it would have to be done by decidedly dodgy surgeons, and families came up with complex backstories to the accidents that had befallen the boys, falling off a horse to being attacked by a wild boar. So this is a pair of castratori held in front of a painting of Italian castrati singer, something that I can't pronounce. So this is, I don't know, the tool they used to castrate them. The golden age of the castrati. But the golden age of the castrati came in the 17th and 18th centuries when they became the stars of the opera stage. Francesco Bernardi, or Senesino, as he became known, was born in 1686. I'm like laughing at my own inability to say these fucking names, and went on to appear in many of Handel's works, including the operas Giulio Cesare and Rodelinda. One contemporary account says he had a powerful, clear, equal, and sweet contralto voice with a perfect intonation and an excellent shake. His manner of singing was masterly and his elocution unrivaled. He sang allegros with great fire and marked rapid divisions from the chest in an articulate and pleasing manner. Wow, what a fucking description. Imagine saying that sentence. Like in real life, like actually saying, well, I guess I say some ridiculous shit, so never mind. Farinelli came a little later, but quickly rose to become one of the most famous musicians of his age. Born Carlo Maria Michelangelo Nicola Broschi in 1705, his parents probably decided to find someone to operate on him as a result of his father's death. Having a castrato in the family could bring in a lot of money. So let's see. Okay, so this is the image that kind of like, I was like, oh shit, this is kind of weird and interesting. And this is like a depiction of the tall lankiness of this castrati by the lack of testosterone and estrogen. One musician who heard him sing in Milan in 1726 said Farinelli had a penetrating, full, rich, bright, and well-modulated soprano voice with a range at that time from the A below middle C to the D 2 octaves above middle C. His intonation was pure, his trill beautiful, his breath control extraordinary, and his throat very agile. So that he performed, imagine saying your throat's agile. Sounds like something I'd tell some chick. You got an agile throat. So anyway, that he performed the widest intervals quickly and the greatest ease and certainty. Farinelli also performed music by Handel and went on to become a favorite of European royalty. He was hired by Queen Elisabetta Farnese, I don't fucking know, of Spain to cure the depression of her husband, Philip V. So a satirical drawing of Senesino, Baronstadt, and soprano Francesca Cuzzoni in the center. Okay. So anyway, this is one of the pictures I thought was interesting. Anyways, at the time when I first saw it, I didn't read the full thing, but anyways, it's sort of like depicting how disproportionately like tall and weird the bone structure is of the castrati. So the last castrato, the last role to be written for a castrato was that of Armando in Maber's Il Crociato in Egitto. And castration was made illegal after the unification of Italy in 1861. But it wasn't until 1878 that Pope Leo the something, which I should know this, but I don't, banned the church from hiring castrati. And the official end came in 1903 when Pew, the something that I should also know, but I don't, declared whenever it is desirable to employ the high voices of sopranos and contraltos, These parts must be taken by boys, according to the most ancient usage of the church. Alessandro Moreschi was the last castrato to sing in the Sistine Chapel choir, and an astonishing recording survives him of singing. Made in 1902, he would retire just a few years later in 1913 and died in 1922. So this recording isn't Moreschi in his prime, but it's the closest we'll get to hearing a voice that has disappeared forever from the classical world. So this is the Last Castrati, and I think the only one ever actually recorded. Haunting, if I say so myself. Now, one thing that's notable is this guy's hairline. It's been exactly the same since he was a boy, which is interesting. So he had this this section up here that kind of like went up, even though it wasn't like traditional recession. It was just this thing. Anyways, so no hair loss for these guys, which is interesting. And it sort of is like harks back to essentially what finasteride is doing is like making like a more toned down version of a castrati, essentially. Like you're literally like wiping out a significant chunk of the DHT, which if you had finasteride in somebody prepubescent, they wouldn't develop like this, but it would be like sort of halfway between getting to where you need to be and the castrati. Like you'd end up with like immature penis, you know, not fully developed masculine features, blah, blah, blah. It would be just a bad outcome if you're using this in a prepubescent state. So you can just imagine, you know, wiping out all androgens entirely. Like there's like no sexual differentiation. Well, there is sexual differentiation, but it's like, it's based on just like what you've been genetically given, not the androgens actually like pushing you to where you should be. So it's kind of like these, I don't know, it's kind of like halfway developed like men that aren't actually men yet because they were sort of in a hormonal state of a boy and looked like a boy at the time based on, you know, androgen levels and, you know, the sexual differentiation that happens from age 0 to whatever. But once they get castrated, they never get that big surge of androgens that then, you know, causes all the massive changes and, you know, facilitates the process by which would eventually result in growth plate fusion, where you stop, you know, growing in height and whatnot. So these guys would have a interesting anatomy from a skeleton context, I guess, and their voices, notably, you know, no viralization of the voice. So normally if you take, you know, even women who compete at, you know, top, you know, physique shows and whatnot, they take like even a little fucking dose of Anavar for too long at too high of a dose, and all of a sudden, voice is changing. They take too much nandrolone for too long. Voice is changing. Like minuscule things that a guy could otherwise get away with, you know, 10 times more of. Like the amount of androgens it takes to actually take you from sounding like a castrati to like pushing you into puberty state is not that much. So these guys are like full blown wiped out androgen wise, with just trace amounts from their adrenals. So it's almost like it's not like a menopausal woman almost, but before puberty for a male, but it's sort of like, that's like the closest natural hormonal state you could really like, I don't know. Well, I guess prepubescent. They basically just stay like prepubescent like forever, even though they continue to grow in like I don't know, an adult chronological timeline. The androgens never actually facilitate the getting to where they need to go, sexual differentiation, like finalization wise. So anyway, the second article I wanted to look at was this Daily Mail article. And the reason I had it separately, I didn't even have it loaded up, is because I got fucking nuked with advertisements last time I opened it. And it like broke my computer. So I'm trying to avoid this situation. Like, oh man, this fucking website's a nightmare, dude. No, I don't want notifications. Breaking news from every angle. Fucking pop up about Extinction Rebellion activists. No, I don't care, dude. Fuck off. We see you're using ad blocker. Holy shit. It's just like, fucking ad here, fucking hook over here, slap you in the fucking dick over here. Just like nonstop with this shit. So I'm gonna take my ad blocker off just for you guys. So here we go. We're going to Daily Mail with no ad blocker, guys. This is some risky shit. Okay, here we go. Load. Today's top videos. Get the fuck out of here. If I like news and showbiz, you'll love this. Fuck off. Like you literally close an ad, then it's like, why are you closing the ad? Like, open it back up, bitch. Another one pops up. Fuck you. I'm trying to read your article. Do you want me to stay on your site? Do you want me to stay on your site? Please tell me. So anyways, the gruesome price of being a 19th century castrati. Researchers exhume opera singer skeleton and find castration and constant practice caused massive changes to his body. Researchers examined body of 19th century singer Gaspar Pacchiarati. Castration before puberty along with singing practices affected the body. The singer had erosion in cervical vertebrae and decreased bone density, had changes to respiratory muscles that elevate ribs and aid breathing. Up until the end of the 1800s, a gruesome practice was performed on male opera singers to preserve their mezzo-soprano voices. So anyways, you already know what happened. I already described it. And this guy's skeleton. So researchers from the University of Padua in Italy exhumed the body of this guy to understand more about the singers known as the castrati. The singers' remains are pictured on the left and the portrait shown on the right. So this is the skeleton, as well as what the guy supposedly looked like. There's the skull. There is the spine. Hang on. CT scan of the spine. Analysis showed the presence of epiphyseal lines on Pacchiareti's iliac crest, which are typically fused at 23 years old and disappear by the time a man is older than 35. Persistence of epiphyseal line in the iliac crest is shown above. So that was what I was noting earlier about the lack of that happening from the lack of sufficient testosterone aromatizing into estradiol, which is notable because in puberty, something that is actually being evaluated in a clinical setting now for people who are like height deficient, you know, like clinically, not just like proactively because you want to be taller, but it's being looked at in a clinical setting as the concurrent use of aromatase inhibitors with growth hormone. So this is something that apparently is actually being used like recreationally too, which is interesting to say the least. And is could be a whole video in itself. But anyways, and it's not something I would recommend, by the way. I'm just saying that physiologically, the mechanism by which this growth is then like signaled to stop is via sufficient aromatization. So this is also why it would be wise to stay lean and not get fat as a teenager, because you could otherwise cause premature growth plate closure. And you should also not take SARMs, SERMs, anabolic agents, etc., anything that's going to fuck up your endocrine profile when you are in your teens. Until now, only one other castrato skeleton has ever been examined, a singer named Carlo Maria Michelangelo Nicola Broschi, who went by the stage name Farinelli. The castrati were often much taller than their unaltered peers. Researchers explain in a paper published today in Scientific Reports. Pacchiareti stood more than 6 feet tall. Castrato were unusually tall with a large barrel-shaped chest, infantile larynx, long spindly legs, the authors wrote. Pacchiareti's bones confirmed these characteristics, in particular the height that was estimated measuring femurs, tibia, and humeri length, and gave a value of around 191 centimeters. So, it's not like that's, you know, exceptionally tall or anything, but apparently historically, like relative to, I guess, the averages, the castrati were very tall. CT scans revealed vertebral fractures and a decrease in bone density. Researchers say the hormonal effects of castration led these singers to develop osteoporosis and disorders of the spine. So this is partially like, think about when women hit menopause and all of a sudden estrogen production plummets into the ground, and all of a sudden, you know, what happens? You know, osteoporosis, bone degradation, etc. These are all things that happen in the deprivation environment of estrogen. So it's not a coincidence that these individuals experience similar outcomes during a much, even like young in their life. The erosion of the cervical vertebrae were also attributed to the posture and movements of the neck and head during singing exercises. They also found modifications in the insertion of 3 respiratory muscles, which work to elevate certain ribs and assist in breathing. Along with this, the analysis revealed markings on the scapulae that indicate Pacchiareti used his arms frequently during his performances. So anyways, let's see. CT scans revealed the singer's skeletal abnormalities weren't only attributed to castration. Let's see. They were strongly eroded with signs of osteophytic lipping in the body because of osteoporosis and of continuous movements of the head and neck during singing exercises. These conditions can be considered as an occupational marker for the singers, as it was confirmed by Pacchiaretti's vertebral conditions. These findings are very significant because it is the first time that they can be observed in the remains of a castrato. They also found other changes in his body and bones, including modifications in the insertion of 3 respiratory muscles which work to elevate certain ribs and assist in breathing. Along with this, the analysis revealed markings on the scapulae. Yeah, we already mentioned that. The results provide a unique look at the little examined development of the castrati and help to reveal some of the secrets behind Pacchiaretti's sublime voice. Sublime. Despite his castration and bone conditions, the researchers say the famous singer, who died at the age of 81, still had many amorous relationships during his life. Interesting. So this is what Michael Jackson was speculated to have happened to him. And I don't know how accurate that is, because apparently he's the only one of his family, of his siblings, who maintained a high-pitched voice into his actual career. But it seemed like there was some pushback on that. Like when I brought it up last time, there were some comments, basically, arguing against that point. And I don't know if it's factual or not. It was just a hypothesis, that I had, and I actually saw that Joe Rogan had too, interestingly enough. So, I don't know if that was true or not, but nonetheless, very interesting, morphological changes that occur as a result of hormonal environment as you develop, and these guys that would just like grow taller for, interestingly, because of hormone deprivation, not an excess of something. You would have like a deprivation of something that leads to like unregulated growth. Not in a good way either if you have weak fucking bones, obviously. But, and then also obviously the fact that they wouldn't lose hair for the entirety of their lives from lack of androgen sort of reinforces the androgen hypothesis. For miniaturization of hair follicles and whatnot. And it's not really a coincidence that, now the thing is, I tried to dig really hard to find some images of castrati, in old age to see if they actually all had perfect hair or not. And the problem is it's hard to find like actual like human castrati pictures, and then you often end up finding eunuchs with hair loss, and then you think like, oh, it's bullshit. But it's like, you could also argue that it's the lack of estrogen. If you even find a picture of one with shitty hair, it's like, well, they also have no estrogen, let alone androgen, so you're probably not going to keep your hair either. It's not a coincidence that women start losing their hair as they get older after menopause and their estrogen's in the toilet. Now, they'll still maintain better hair than a guy who has high androgens and high estrogen, but that's just the fucking paradox, unfortunately, of being a male. And, and it's obviously not a coincidence that males who are severely balding, when they undergo hormonal replacement therapy from male to female, they end up regrowing a shit ton of their hair, in the lack of androgens and excess of estrogens kind of thing. So basically manipulating their hormone profile to equate to that of a female. So basically the reason the castrati would not lose hair does not seem to be because of their estrogen levels. It's more so the lack of androgen levels. So it's almost like I said, it's like the equivalent of taking dutasteride and like fucking some other anti-androgen when you are like 12 years old. Like that's like what's going on here, or earlier than that actually. So, as well as an aromatase inhibitor, I guess, because that would be the physiologic equivalent. So at least pharmacologically, and that's what it seems to be looked at clinically right now is, for growth deficient children, is this aromatase inhibitor growth hormone stack. And doesn't seem to be the healthiest thing, obviously. It's actually very fucking bad. But for somebody who is literally going to become 5'1", if they didn't do this, you can obviously see where the clinical intervention starts to make sense. Like I think Lionel Messi was determined to be, I think maybe even like a legal, what's like the legal cutoff for a dwarf? I don't even remember, but he was like pretty determined to be pretty fucking short if he didn't undergo growth hormone intervention, which I don't think back then they were using aromatase inhibitors concurrently, but at the time he used exogenous growth hormone, and that, pushed him up to where he is now. And if he didn't do that, he probably wouldn't have ever been as successful as he is. So very interesting, and probably could be a dedicated video in itself, to be honest. So anyways, Interesting shit. I've had this on my to-do list for a while. I wanted to bring it up and kind of give some insight into the physiologic mechanisms behind the hormonal interplay and the cascades going on in these guys that have been castrated at a young age. And, you know, I guess it's story time with Derek. It was kind of fun to read through these, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram, at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, my recommended blood test panels, pharma-grade hair loss medications, anything else I'm associated with, it's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.